essentially happening is we're being influenced by fear, uncertainty, and doubt. Okay? How many, we saw in the previous presentation a slide that, with the guy in the black, or the woman, we never know, right? All we know is that there's some crazy person out there, some criminal, some hacktivist, some cyber terrorist who's going to try to infiltrate our company and then exfiltrate data, right? So we need to put this in context, and this is the kind of reality that I think is really has been missing for 20 years, even back in the day from the end of just simple antiviruses like this gets. Okay, so organizations tend to underspend on security because of this fear, uncertainty, and doubt. They either underspend, overspend, or spend uselessly on security. Okay, and this is documented. This comes from studies and researches as well. All right. Now, this slide comes from a Forrester research report that came out, I think, back in 2012, something like this. It's on a blog out there. I think it's great. The classic statement is defense in depth. And the concept of defense in depth, I'll show you later on in a slide with a castle on it. But the idea is that you can segment it and minimize your risk through this kind of segmentation. You peel away the layers of the onion, and by the end, you're left with nothing. So you're fairly secure if you're doing sort of defense in depth strategy. As you can see, it can be fairly complex. The larger the organization, and some organizations have millions of nodes, over 1 million nodes, or you get very small organizations. And from business to business, their needs change, right? But the problem is, in particular with small businesses, is that who arguably need security more than anybody else, right? The issue is that it's not just a question of complexity, it's also a question of we can't afford to secure ourselves properly because everything is so darn expensive, okay? And that's a big problem in the small and medium-sized business space, which is how do we achieve, as security practitioners, a reasonable cost in exchange for reasonable value, right? And I call that marginal resilience, and I'll get to that in just a minute. Okay, kind of an economics concept, right? Resilience at the margin. How much extra security do you get for that last dollar that you spend, right? And does it make sense to spend all the way up until you get no marginal resilience, which would essentially be perfect security, right? So how do we change this dynamic? How do we change this dynamic of fear, uncertainty, and doubt? And I could go into all kinds of different marketing strategies that I've seen over the years from the biggest security vendors out there, which frankly didn't do anybody any good. Okay, not even them. So times have changed. We see things like Periscope is really cool new stuff, and we've got the social thing going on. You have Periscope, and WhatsApp is now social and owned by Facebook. And so we've got the mobility, we've got the Internet of Things coming out and growing, and new things coming out all the time. There's just an explosion of things out there. We've got big data, virtualization, and software-defined networks. So we've got all these new things coming out, all this new technology. And the way security has always operated is we secure the latest stuff because that's the stuff that's time to market issues. It gets out before it's insecure, right? So that a company can cash in on this great new innovation, right? The problem is that tendency to try to secure the latest and greatest is misleading because we forget to secure the fundamental stuff that really needs securing. The latest and greatest can probably wait because we probably don't even have it yet, right, or haven't yet implemented it. Now, the other issue that this brings up is the simple fact that nowadays we're not dealing with the same old stuff anymore. We don't have, I think I put this in the wrong order. We don't have this kind of scenario anymore. We don't have a perimeter, a definable perimeter, because we have mobile devices. We have shadow IT. We have this issue of DevOps and the idea that you have departments who need to be involved in the development process and who may have their own IT people who aren't part of the IT department. So the idea that we now have a clear understanding at all times in the largest of networks of even what we own becomes very, very intangible. I mean, it becomes a real idea rather than anything we can physically do. So we're still, unfortunately, stuck in the age of firewall and trying to build up our perimeter, improve our firewalls, the next generation firewalls, intrusion detection systems, things that are focused on securing our perimeter. But nowadays, we don't have a perimeter. To some extent, we just don't have a perimeter. Does that mean that we don't need to know what we've got? No. We still need to know what we've got. In fact, it's fundamental that we do know what we have, because if we don't know what we have, we don't know what to do. Okay? So to go back to the previous slide, it also puts much more emphasis, the fact that now anybody can potentially be a security hole, right? It puts much more emphasis on the individual. So for those who can't quite see the bottom of this slide, it says fumbling with the recliner button, Ted unwittingly instigates a disaster. In the window there's a wing flying off of the plane, right? And unfortunately he's pressed the button that says wings stay on or wings fall on. Now why he has that button to begin with absolutely doesn't make any sense to me, but that actually does happen. There are people who have accesses that they shouldn't have access to. There are people who are able to do stuff that they just shouldn't be able to do at all. And frankly, I've been seeing a lot of really interesting research come out lately, which is that this guy is an executive. He may be the CEO of his company or a CFO. He may be an IT admin. Those are the guys with what are called privileged accounts. Okay, you have a privileged account. You've got a serious responsibility to ensure that you're not screwing up in terms of phishing, and you don't have an admin, you're not operating with an admin account on your laptop. Stupid stuff that a lot of people just forget and shouldn't be doing. They should be using standard user accounts whenever possible. There's just a lot of basic stuff. The fundamentals, if we handle the fundamentals, I'll show you some data on this. We're going to be much better off, and we're not going to spend that much money on this stuff. Okay. So this is why I think in the next stage, in the next phase of security, it's not just an issue of training, it's an issue of, and not just an issue of awareness, it's an issue of owning the responsibility of security. That everyone in every organization, if you're employed there, you have an interest, a basic interest in the continuity of that organization, right? And in the well-being of the organization's clients. And that needs to be really well communicated, I think, to users and executives, right? So I think if you walk away with nothing else, this is probably the most important slide. Your business needs come first. You're in business to do contracting. You're in business to do construction. You're in business as an architect. That's your business. You can't spend your whole day securing your laptop or your application server or what have you, right? That just doesn't make a heck of a lot of sense, right? But at the same time, you're also the best capable of ensuring that you have the most appropriate security, that you're right-sizing the security for your enterprise, right? Because you know your business better than anybody else. In the end, that's what you need to do, is you need to make sure that you have safe and secure business processes, right? So to begin with, you start with business needs drive security, not the infrastructure. That's a huge mistake I think a lot of people are making. That's why we invest incorrectly in security solutions. Here's a great example. How many of you have antivirus deployed, a third-party antivirus deployed on your Windows machine? What is it? Kaspersky or Symantec or McAfee or something like this. Well, antiviruses, Symantec said in the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times and everywhere, I don't know, maybe a year ago or two, 7 years too late, they said, that the antivirus was obsolete. Okay? The antivirus, at the time they announced it, had been obsolete for 7 years. And nobody told you that everybody was buying the same signatures from the same organization. Right? They were acquiring the same signatures. Right? So the idea that you've been dumping money uselessly for a decade into a technology that was expensive too. I mean, it's, on a per user basis, it's not cheap, right? What could you have done with that money otherwise? And that's what marginal resilience is. You were getting little to no value for that last dollar spent, and you should not do that, right? That is fundamental. Anti-malware, very important. Anything that's signature-based, very important. If you have a large, if in some way you can associate it with large populations. Large population of users, you probably need anti-malware. You know, need to have a serious look at anti-malware, right? Small population of users, probably the risk is so minimal that you can get away with Windows Defender, right? Which is free, right? Which is also anti-malware. So, so these are the things that you know you can do, and there's a lot of stuff out there that is of zero cost, or so little that you might as well deploy it. Like field authentication, you can now get authentication from the mobile phone for most of your applications integrated onto that application, so that your users can use two-factor authentication through their mobile device for maybe $1 per user per year. Right? Good investment? Probably. So focus on high-value controls. Maybe two-factor authentication isn't necessary, or isn't really that important for your organization. But you know, this slide is really interesting. This came from Verizon's data breach report for healthcare. Okay. Now I didn't have time to find one for the construction industry, but in healthcare, you know, what we see here is that the first step, the first mitigating step, has an enormous value. The next one a little less, right? But still significant value. And the third one, still significant value. Every other mitigating control that's implemented has a tiny, tiny marginal value. Now, if you're in the financial industry, you own a bank, right? Probably need to get way the heck out here to get to 98.8, you know, 98.9 degree of protection and resilience, right? You probably have built your own platform, your own security platform. You know, you're doing all kinds of crazy stuff, and you have tons of people employed within your organization. You buy companies, you don't just buy products, right? You spend $300 million on security in a given year, right? That's not most of us. Most of us are back here. The key thing is, what is the 20% of security investment that's going to give you 80% of your resilience value, right? And so this is what it'll do for you. It'll keep you from, it's not going to protect you, right, from the bear chasing you, but it's going to help you run faster than the guy next to you. And that's, unfortunately, that is the way to stay secure. You know, if you're more secure than the next guy in your industry, you're probably not going to be victimized. Because you're just more difficult. It's not worthwhile. This is the critical security controls from SANS Institute, and I wanted to include this slide just to read off a few of these. Their top 5 controls are inventory. In other words, know what you need, what you got that you're protecting, know where your data is and your applications are, and have a complete inventory of those. Where is your sensitive data? Isolate it. It should not be on anyone's laptop. It should be in servers. These are basic things that you can do without spending a heck of a lot of money that are primarily available to you in policy, in a written document, right? You know, there's some technology associated with actually doing an inventory, but a lot of this is also open source. You can probably get it for free. Secure configuration for hardware and software and mobile devices and laptops, workstations and servers, continuous vulnerability assessment and remediation. I have a bit of a problem with this for small businesses. Now, most people will say, hey, you know what? Audit your company, because otherwise you can't make a solid decision. Your CFO needs to make the right decision, but that's backwards. Again, it's not, you know, we did that because back in the day, people would just buy a firewall and buy an IDS and buy this and buy that, right, without actually thinking, where am I vulnerable to attack, right? But the fact is, especially for small businesses, if you get lost in the minutia, you're going to be unprotected. So the first thing to do really is understand your business and take care of the big things first, and then go back. And once you've taken care of those big things, you may be better off hiring a consultant, or there's certain steps that you can take prior to investing. 5 or 7.5 or 10 or 18,000 bucks is going to cost you to do an audit. Okay, I realize that I'm probably blaspheming here. It is really important to do audits at some point. It's just not clear where that point is unless you sit down and think about your business first. Okay? So we could go into each of those controls, unfortunately, has another who knows how many subsections, right? And the first, you know, the top several, this came out of Verizon's data breach investigation report. not the same one as the previous one. I do one annually. It says two-factor authentication is really effective. Patching web services really effective. There's certain things that you can just do that are really effective. And again, if you understand your business and you're working with somebody who understands security, you can probably get a lot of this done very cost effectively. So I'd like to go back to the first time I saw something like this was literally about 20 years ago. Okay? Nothing has changed. Nothing has changed in 20 years. So this is still really, really the most basic stuff. I mean, nowadays, we need to be more aware of data, right? So we need to think about data security as opposed to network security, because network security doesn't work. I don't know if you've read the press and security, information security, but basically for the last several years, the practitioners have been saying, we're unsuccessful and we can't secure anything. If there's an advanced attack, you're probably going to suffer a breach. And the question is not if you're going to suffer, but when and how long it's going to take for you to figure it out. How agile and quick are you in detecting and responding? And that's why monitoring is up there at the top, right? But first, you got to take care of this. Really, you got to take care of this. Policy, training, some kind of an understanding of, some kind of an assessment of where you are right now. Then you can look at things like encryption. AAA is authentication, authorization, and access control. A lot of that you're already doing. So a lot of this you're already doing or can do through your regular IT guy. Okay, and the question is, again, make sure you're doing things properly. Okay, and then finally, it may make sense for you to do monitoring, log management, monitoring, and things like this, but I won't go into the technical details of all that right now. I've been talking a lot about mitigation, risk mitigation, right? But you don't have to just mitigate risk, right? You can avoid risk, you can ignore risk, right? Or you can transfer risk. Those are the four things you can do with risk, okay? It's business risk. There's nothing new about this stuff. We all have health insurance, we've all got business insurance, and frankly, I think at some point cyber insurance will be a component of your business risk insurance. There are things that are insurable, there are things that are not insurable. Your reputation, brand, customer churn, that's not insurable, and that may be pretty darn important. That was one of those things on the first slide that I showed, right? The important thing I think about this slide, and this came from the Ponemon Institute, is that we can, as an insurance company, we can cover about 48% of your risk, right? That can be covered. 48% of your risk can be covered. Now, if you're addressing some other risk management strategy like avoidance or control, right, mitigating controls, etc., then you can actually get to about 88%, let's call it 88% coverage to oversimplify the matter, right? So that's pretty darn secure. I mean, if you're doing the fundamentals, this takes into account just focusing on that first 20% of stuff that achieves, say, 75% additional coverage, right? So if you can cover your risk by 75% with just 3 or 4 things, right, then you're going to reduce your costs. In addition to that, you add cyber insurance onto it, and you're going to cover an additional component of your risk, right? You're going to transfer some of that risk. In all, if you work out the math, you're at around 88%. For a lot of companies, it's probably going to be funny, right? Now, if you want to get into that last 12%, you can do that, but you have to understand that your marginal resilience is going to diminish. That is, you're going to spend more money to get that last extra percentage.